Value is one of those words that people throw around often, but very few truly understand what it means in the eyes of a man. Many women assume that their worth is tied only to how beautiful they look, how much attention they give, or how accommodating they are in a relationship. But in reality, a man's perception of value is far deeper than what is visible on the surface. A woman's value is not measured by her looks alone, nor by her ability to constantly give or sacrifice. It is measured by the way she carries herself, the energy she radiates, the respect she demands through her actions, and the boundaries she upholds. A man may be drawn initially by beauty or charm, but what determines whether he respects, cherishes, and truly values a woman long-term has everything to do with what lies beneath. The hidden truth is that value is not something you can fake. It is not something you can mask with temporary actions or superficial behavior. It is either deeply rooted in who you are, or it eventually unravels through the habits you choose to live by. And here lies the problem. Many women unknowingly adopt habits that slowly chip away at their worth in a man's eyes, without realizing how destructive those patterns are. What may feel natural, generous, or even loving at first can turn into behaviors that strip away respect and admiration over time. Men may not always express this directly, but they notice. They observe the subtle shifts, and once a man's view of your value begins to decline, it becomes nearly impossible to reverse that perception. This is why awareness is power. You cannot guard something if you do not recognize its fragility. You cannot protect your worth if you are blind to the very habits that diminish it. Think about it. Value is like a flame. It burns brightly when it is nurtured with balance, respect, and strength. But when it is smothered by desperation, insecurity, or chaos, the flame grows weaker until it flickers out. Too often, women confuse constant giving or endless sacrifice as a demonstration of love when in fact it quietly signals a lack of boundaries and self-respect. Too often they seek reassurance or validation, thinking it will draw a man closer when instead it pushes him away. Too often they tolerate disrespect toward themselves, believing love requires endurance, when in reality, it only teaches a man that her value is negotiable. Understanding this is not about fear or paranoia, it is about strength. When you know the truth about how value works, you protect it fiercely. You stop engaging in behaviors that drain your energy and diminish your presence. You recognize that being valued has nothing to do with bending over backward to please someone, and everything to do with embodying a standard that commands respect. A man may not articulate these dynamics, but he feels them. He feels when a woman radiates confidence, when she respects herself enough to say no, when she doesn't chase approval, but instead stands firm in who she is. That presence is magnetic, and it is what makes her unforgettable. The most dangerous mistake is assuming that men are blind to habits that weaken attraction. They may not call them out directly, but they act on what they see. They may lose interest quietly. They may pull away without warning, or they may simply stop investing in the relationship with the same intensity as before. This is not because love is fickle, but because value once compromised rarely returns. And that is why the most powerful thing you can do is recognize these destructive habits early, understand how they erode your worth, and make the choice to eliminate them. True value comes from within, but it must be guarded against the very behaviors that threaten to destroy it. The habits that destroy a woman's value in a man's eyes are rarely obvious in the beginning. They don't come crashing down in a single moment, and they don't announce themselves loudly. Instead, they creep in silently, disguised as normal behavior, until they erode the foundation of respect piece by piece. This is what makes them so dangerous, because most women never notice the damage until it's too late. A man will not always confront you about these patterns. He may not argue or even complain. What he will do is slowly change his energy, withdraw his presence, and shift his level of investment. By the time you realize something has shifted, the silent sabotage has already done its work. Men don't lose value for a woman overnight. It happens gradually, as repeated habits send signals that she doesn't even realize she's broadcasting. This is why consistency matters so much more than isolated actions. You can have moments of strength, confidence, and balance, but if your habits constantly undermine those moments, the overall impression he holds of you will decline. A single argument, a single moment of vulnerability, or even one mistake doesn't ruin a woman's value, but the ongoing repetition of destructive patterns does. Think of it like water dripping on stone. One drop means nothing, but over time it shapes the entire surface. In the same way, the habits that seem small or insignificant, overgiving, constantly seeking reassurance, disregarding boundaries, or unleashing emotional chaos, become defining features in a man's perception of you. And once those features dominate, attraction and respect begin to vanish. The truth many avoid facing is that regaining value after it is lost is almost impossible. Respect, once broken, rarely returns to its original strength. This is why the most important step is prevention, not repair. You cannot expect a man to cherish what you do not protect within yourself. You cannot expect him to value what you continuously devalue with your choices. The silent saboteur of destructive habits works slowly, but once it has done its damage, it rarely leaves space for recovery. The key, therefore, is to open your eyes now, to recognize the patterns before they drain your presence of its power. Only then can you hold on to the kind of value that commands lasting respect. One of the most common habits that destroys a woman's value in a man's eyes is over-nurturing. At first glance, it doesn't seem like a flaw at all. Caring deeply, giving generously, and showing affection are all beautiful qualities. But when those qualities become excessive, when a woman gives too much too soon and without balance, it stops being nurturing and starts being smothering. What feels like love in her mind translates to neediness in his. It sends the unspoken message that her worth is tied to how much she can do for him, rather than who she is at her core. A man may accept this treatment at first, but deep down he begins to lose respect for it. Why? Because true value is never in overextending yourself. It is in knowing your worth and allowing someone to earn your giving. The psychology behind over-nurturing is simple. When a woman pours endlessly without boundaries, she unintentionally removes the space for a man to contribute. She fills every gap, fixes every problem, anticipates every need, and in doing so, she disrupts the natural balance of giving and receiving. Men do not feel inspired or attracted when they are smothered with care. They feel drained, trapped, and even emasculated. Instead of seeing her as a woman of strength and balance, they begin to see her as someone desperate to be needed, someone who does not know how to hold back and allow love to grow naturally. And once that impression sets in, admiration turns into tolerance, and tolerance eventually turns into distance. The most powerful women are not the ones who give without limits, but the ones who know when to stop giving. They understand that their presence, their affection, and their effort carry weight only when they are not handed out endlessly. Over-nurturing destroys value because it teaches a man that her love is unconditional no matter how little he contributes, no matter how much he withdraws, and no matter how little effort he invests. And when a man realizes he doesn't have to do anything to keep receiving, he stops valuing what he's given. That is why learning to give in balance, not out of desperation or fear, but out of strength, is the only way to keep respect alive in his eyes. The reason over-nurturing backfires is because men are not wired to be attracted to what is handed to them without effort. When a woman gives endlessly, when she anticipates every need and overextends herself, it creates an imbalance that shifts the dynamics of attraction. Men are designed to value what they earn, not what they are given for free. When there is no challenge, no space for effort, no reason for him to step forward and contribute, he begins to pull away. This isn't always intentional. Sometimes it happens subconsciously. The more a woman gives without boundaries, the more a man feels smothered and the less compelled he feels to invest in her. What started as affection transforms into pressure, and instead of creating intimacy, it suffocates it. Another dangerous consequence of over-nurturing is that it strips away the mystery that keeps a man intrigued. When you give everything up front, your time, your energy, your emotions, your care, you leave nothing for him to earn, nothing for him to chase, nothing for him to discover about you over time. A relationship becomes predictable, and predictability without depth leads to boredom. Over-nurturing takes away the balance of reciprocity, and without that balance, respect starts to vanish. Instead of being seen as a woman of high value, you are seen as someone who is trying too hard to hold on, someone who does not believe she is worthy without overcompensating. And that perception erodes attraction faster than almost anything else. The truth is, men value women who know how to give, but who also know how to hold back. A woman who understands balance communicates strength. She says without words, I know my worth. I don't need to lose myself in order to be loved. That presence commands respect. But when a woman overnurtures, she communicates weakness. She says, I will give everything because I fear losing you. And men can sense that energy instantly. What backfires is not the act of giving itself, but the lack of boundaries behind the giving. To keep your value alive, you must give from a place of strength, not from fear. That is what makes your presence unforgettable in the eyes of a man. Another habit that silently destroys a woman's value in a man's eyes is the constant need for validation. On the surface, asking for reassurance may feel innocent, even loving, but underneath it reveals something much deeper, an insecurity that eats away at attraction. When a woman continually asks, do you still love me? Do you still find me attractive? Are you sure you want to be with me? She thinks she is seeking connection, but what a man hears is doubt. That doubt doesn't just weaken her in his eyes, it makes him question her strength, her confidence, and her sense of self. Men are drawn to women who radiate certainty in themselves, women who don't need external words to know their worth. When validation becomes a constant request, it slowly strips away that magnetic energy of confidence and replaces it with an energy of desperation. The danger of relying on a man's reassurance is that it shifts the power dynamic completely. Instead of being rooted in her own self-worth, she hands him control over how she feels about herself. When his words are good, she feels good. When his words are lacking, she feels unworthy. That dependency becomes exhausting, and instead of feeling inspired to uplift her, he begins to feel drained by her constant need. Over time, this pressure makes him withdraw emotionally because no amount of validation can fill the void of someone who does not trust their own value. The more she asks, the less he wants to give, and the less he gives, the more insecure she becomes. It becomes a cycle that only pushes him further away. Confidence is not about never questioning yourself, but about refusing to let those questions dictate your behavior. A woman who knows her worth does not need constant reminders. Her presence speaks louder than any reassurance. Men naturally respect women who stand firmly in their identity, who know they are enough without anyone else's approval. Seeking validation may feel like a small habit, but over time, it corrodes attraction and respect. The woman who holds her value with quiet certainty is the one who never has to ask if she's loved, because her energy makes it undeniable. Another habit that silently destroys a woman's value in a man's eyes is the constant need for validation. On the surface, asking for reassurance may feel innocent, even loving, but underneath it reveals something much deeper, an insecurity that eats away at attraction. When a woman continually asks, do you still love me? Do you still find me attractive? Are you sure you want to be with me? She thinks she is seeking connection, but what a man hears is doubt. That doubt doesn't just weaken her in his eyes, it makes him question her strength, her confidence, and her sense of self. Men are drawn to women who radiate certainty in themselves, women who don't need external words to know their worth. When validation becomes a constant request, it slowly strips away that magnetic energy of confidence and replaces it with an energy of desperation. The danger of relying on a man's reassurance is that it shifts the power dynamic completely. Instead of being rooted in her own self-worth, she hands him control over how she feels about herself. When his words are good, she feels good. When his words are lacking, she feels unworthy. That dependency becomes exhausting, and instead of feeling inspired to uplift her, he begins to feel drained by her constant need. Over time, this pressure makes him withdraw emotionally, because no amount of validation can fill the void of someone who does not trust their own value. The more she asks, the less he wants to give, and the less he gives, the more insecure she becomes. It becomes a cycle that only pushes him further away. Confidence is not about never questioning yourself, but about refusing to let those questions dictate your behavior. A woman who knows her worth does not need constant reminders. Her presence speaks louder than any reassurance. Men naturally respect women who stand firmly in their identity, who know they are enough without anyone else's approval. Seeking validation may feel like a small habit, but over time it corrodes attraction and respect. The woman who holds her value with quiet certainty is the one who never has to ask if she's loved, because her energy makes it undeniable. One of the most damaging habits a woman can fall into is disrespecting herself, because the way you treat yourself sets the standard for how everyone else will treat you. Men watch closely, not just how you treat them, but how you carry yourself, how you honor your own boundaries, and how you respond when those boundaries are crossed. When a woman neglects herself, whether emotionally, physically, or mentally, she sends the silent message that she does not see her own worth. And if she doesn't see it, why should he? A man may not always say it directly, but he notices when a woman constantly compromises her values, when she allows herself to be disrespected, or when she tolerates less than what she deserves. Every time she accepts something that diminishes her, her value in his eyes weakens. Self-respect is the foundation of attraction. A woman who respects herself naturally commands respect from others, including men. But when self-respect is missing, it creates an energy of weakness rather than strength. Think about it. If you don't honor your time, why would he? If you let people speak to you in ways that tear you down, why would he hold himself accountable to treat you better? Men are deeply influenced by the standards a woman enforces in her life. If those standards are low, he subconsciously lowers his effort. If those standards are high and non-negotiable, he rises to meet them, or he walks away because he knows he cannot. Either way, she wins because she refuses to let her value be diminished. Disrespecting yourself does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it's in the little compromises that seem harmless but add up over time. Saying yes when you want to say no, allowing behavior that makes you uncomfortable just to avoid conflict, ignoring your needs because you're too focused on his. These may seem small, but each one chips away at your presence and power. Men sense it, and once a man senses that you will tolerate anything just to keep him, the respect that anchors love begins to fade. To maintain your value, you must make self-respect your highest priority, because when you respect yourself, a man has no choice but to follow your lead. Another habit that destroys a woman's value in a man's eyes is living in emotional chaos. Emotions are natural and they are powerful, but when they are left unchecked, they become destructive. A woman who constantly explodes in anger, shifts from joy to rage in moments, or thrives on unnecessary drama creates an environment that drains instead of uplifts. Men are not drawn to chaos, they are drawn to peace. They want a partner who brings balance into their life, not one who destabilizes it with constant unpredictability. When emotions spiral out of control regularly, it doesn't matter how attractive or caring a woman is, eventually the lack of emotional stability overshadows everything else. The danger of emotional chaos is that it creates exhaustion. At first, a man might try to comfort, to fix, to calm, but over time, he realizes that no matter what he does, the storms keep coming. This realization makes him detach, because men instinctively withdraw from what threatens their sense of peace. They are not inspired to fight endless battles that don't lead to growth. Instead of admiring her passion, he starts to see her as unpredictable and unstable. Respect diminishes, and with it, attraction. It's not that men expect women to be emotionless, far from it. But they respect women who can manage their emotions with maturity, who can feel deeply without letting those feelings spiral into destructive chaos. Emotional balance is not about suppressing what you feel, but about mastering it. It's about recognizing when your emotions are valid and when they are sabotaging you. A woman who can pause, breathe, and communicate clearly instead of lashing out communicates strength. She shows that she is in control of herself, and that presence creates safety and admiration. On the other hand, a woman who lets her emotions control her actions communicates weakness because she becomes a prisoner of her own storms. Men quickly recognize the difference, and their level of respect responds accordingly. To keep your value intact, you must remember that your emotions are your responsibility. When you bring peace instead of chaos, you don't just attract a man, you keep his admiration for the long term. The most dangerous part of these habits is that their consequences are rarely spoken aloud. A man will not always sit down and tell you that he's losing respect. He won't always explain that your over-nurturing feels suffocating, that your constant need for reassurance is draining, that your lack of self-respect lowers his admiration, or that your emotional chaos makes him feel unstable. Instead, he will silently adjust his behavior. He will start investing less energy, pulling back affection, or creating distance. He may even stay physically present, but emotionally, he is gone. This silence is the most damaging consequence because it leaves many women confused, wondering what went wrong, when in reality the signals were being sent all along. What you must understand is that men act on what they feel, not on what they say. If a man feels that your habits have weakened his respect for you, he doesn't need to verbalize it. His actions will reveal it. He will stop prioritizing you. He will stop putting in effort. He will stop seeing you as someone he must work to keep, because in his mind, your value has already diminished. By the time you notice this shift, it often feels sudden, but it never is. It is the result of repeated behaviors that slowly chipped away at the foundation until nothing strong was left to hold on to. The unspoken consequence of destructive habits is not just the loss of attraction, but the loss of long-term commitment. Men may still enjoy your company, they may still share moments with you, but they will no longer see you as the woman they want to invest in deeply. This is why it is so important to become aware of these habits now, before they reach the point of no return. Once value is lost in a man's eyes, it is rarely recovered. Respect, once broken, does not rebuild itself. The only way to protect your worth is to recognize these patterns and stop them before they silently erase the admiration that makes a man stay.